YouTube. I am back this afternoon, May 24th, with another video compared to the holiday traffic in the Dallas-Fort Worth area here. My last two videos today, I talked about volcanic activity and how it affects the climate. I also brought out about how we're being lied to when we're being told about global temperature anomalies. The weather patterns do not support what we're being told. I've been alive long enough to know that when global temperatures are above average, they have a certain weather pattern that goes with it. When they're below average, that brings a certain type of weather pattern. How long have we been getting lied to about global temperature? I believe it's been going on since 2008 or so. The reason why I say that, when solar activity declined in 2005, 2007 global temperatures began to drop. They began showing that on the climate global anomalies. That's still there even now, where it went below average in 2007 global temperatures. They openly acknowledged that, and then all of a sudden after that we've never gone below average since, at least according to what they're saying. Yet we've seen many similar weather patterns since then, year after year. Colder, snowier winters, less hurricane landfalls, wetter, cooler conditions overall. So why did they start lying? Because they realized if they told the truth and global temperatures in 2007 did go below average and stay that way afterwards, their agenda would be shot out of the water of global warming by carbon dioxide. And again, that is an attempt to gain control over mankind through taking money out of everybody's pocketbooks for additional taxes, more expensive forms of energy, why do you think so much wind power and solar power? I go through the desert, I see whole square miles covered with solar panels now. It's a very expensive form of energy to mass produce. If you're running a business, that's the last thing you want to do is have something that has astronomical costs and doesn't really yield much. And that's what all this wind power, solar power, it astronomically costs so much to get it online, but it produces only a minuscule amount of power to justify the expense. And yet, the reason why all of this is happening is, again, because of carbon dioxide. Everybody thinks mankind is screwing up the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, and it actually has very little to do with what man is doing in reality. oceans that are putting it into the atmosphere, not man. Great majority of it. So we have been getting lied to, because if they told the truth again about if global temperatures in 2007 went below average, and they did go below average, they acknowledged that, but then it suddenly mysteriously went back up again. And I don't believe global temperatures really did go back up after 2007. They might in 2012 return to slightly above average for a little while because of the solar max we had around that time, which is a weak max. Maybe they might have gone back up to average maybe in 2012, maybe even a bit above. But then in 2013, they fell back again. Global temperatures. The weather patterns tell the story. 2012, 2013, a very severe winter. Maine, on the first day of spring, we got a 20-inch snowstorm. That year in 2013. 2013, 2014 was my first year of driving. The winter was extremely severe. Over much of the U.S. that year. And yet, the media was trying to say that global temperatures were at record levels during these years, that it somehow went back up from 2007 and never went back down again. I believe from the weather patterns I've observed, global temperature did perhaps recover to normal maybe for a few months in 2012, because the spring that year was very warm. March featured record warmth over much of the eastern half of the country. It might have gone a little bit above average globally around that time. But then the cold returned later in 2012, 2013, when that solar max began to fade off. That was from 2012. Global temperatures began to drop back off again after that to the low average, and have been since, from what I have seen in the weather patterns. We did get the El Nino in 2016, or they claim. That's another thing I question, is some of these El Ninos. I even think we're getting lied to about that now. They're trying to say there's El Ninos going on in the Pacific, when in reality there isn't. It's just a neutral condition. Because global cooling favors neutral in the Pacific, because even though the trade winds weaken, with more cloud cover over the oceans, with less solar radiation because of lower solar activity reaching the surface, even if the trade winds slow down and don't blow away as much of the water's not going to be as warm because of those other factors. So it's going to even out to where it's just going to be neutral most of the time in the Pacific. You're not going to get an El Nino, and you're not going to get a La Nina either. Global warming favors a La Nina condition because the trade winds get stronger, more vigorous. That means more warm water gets blown to the west. More water comes up from below, cold water. That brings about La Nina conditions. Pacific more frequently. El Nino is caused by an increase in solar activity that puts more heat into the ocean, and or it can be caused by a release of stored up heat in the ocean as well. Or a sudden weakening of the trade winds can cause a temporary El Nino condition if there's enough warm water already there. Like at the onset of a minimum in the 11-year cycle, sometimes there can be an El Nino because the trade winds start to weaken, and at the outset it can pile up a lot of warm water at the equator. These are some mechanics that go into some of these weather events we hear about a lot on the news. Yeah. They're trying to say that, for example, right now there's an El Nino. There is not an El Nino right now, and that's why the National Weather Service has predicted just an average hurricane. They usually predict above average because it's in line with global warming, but they're only saying average. But the reason they're giving is because they say that there's an El Nino in the Pacific, and there is not an El Nino right now. Neutral. Has been neutral the whole winter because the weather patterns don't reflect an El Nino. Pacific Northwest, some very cold periods, a lot of snow in Seattle this winter in February. Doesn't sound like an El Nino to me. Usually in an El Nino, the Pacific Northwest and southern Canada is warm and dry. This year was not at all like that. There was not really an El Nino in the Pacific. The weather patterns say something very different. We're being lied to. Because El Nino to them is in line with global warming. It does warm the atmosphere up when we do have one because of the feedback of the warm water, increased evaporation. So the National Weather Service is saying that because of an El Nino, which we don't have an El Nino, but they're saying because of one, we're going to have just an average hurricane season this year. Of course, they could say that's because of global warming, because if it's an El Nino, that's from global warming. They got to come up with something to justify their agenda. In reality, I feel global temperatures have been below average consistently since 2012. Maybe not quite as bad as after Panitubo, and that's why I brought out Panitubo's effects, because if we get another weak solar cycle here, cycle 25 is weak. The weather patterns we saw after Panitubo could return, but it won't be just for a couple of years. It may be for decades that we end up with that kind of weather. Where North Carolina, the month of May, got 60 inches, 65 feet of snow in one storm in the month of May in North Carolina, in the mountains. So, it's a warning. The blizzard of 93. Where I almost was in an impossible situation, trapped, snowbound for days at a time in the month of March in North Carolina, where the temperature dropped to 0 degrees Fahrenheit with no heat. That's what global cooling can do. Imagine that every year, a weather pattern like that. that lasts, that doesn't go away after just a couple of years, but perhaps goes on for decades. That year, 1992, there was snow on the mountains of North Carolina in June. That gives you an idea as to how different the weather can end up if this solar minimum continues. And that's why I bring out what happened back then, because that is what our future holds if the sun doesn't get active again soon. Being trapped in the winter time, or not even in the winter, spring, it was March 11th, 1993, I was snowbound and trapped in North Carolina for days with no power. They didn't have the equipment to remove all that snow down there. They were totally unprepared for that storm. I was trapped snowbound because I didn't live right in town. I lived out in the rural part of Asheville, Leicester. I did not live where I could just walk somewhere. The snow was hip deep. So this is a warning. I'm putting this out there because these are the kind of weather patterns we're going to see if the sun remains quiet like it's been for a little longer. See, back then, the problem is I didn't have a backup source of heat because I never, like I said in my last video, I never imagined that in North Carolina I'd be snowbound. I went on a hike in 1997 or, no, not, 1995, I think. I hiked a portion of the Appalachian Trail that borders North Carolina and Tennessee, and they had this place, I forgot the name of it, where you come down into this gap, and they talked about on a historical plaque about how in the 1700s they used to cross over that gap on the wagon road, and they talked about a storm that hit in September that deposited several feet of snow up there. It never happens today. They talked about how this storm deposited several feet of snow in only September. In that very spot I was standing where I read that sign. And I stood there in wonderment, like, I just could not believe a storm that severe hit in September in the mountains of North Carolina. The 1700s. Yeah, I mean, I stood there by that sign. I looked around at the view and imagined in September a blizzard up there, catching all these people up there perhaps, trying to get through that gap. That is a warning as to what could happen in the future if the sun remains quiet for several more decades. It hasn't gotten to that severe point yet because we've only had, again, as I've said before, only 1 week solar cycle so far. That's why it isn't even quite as bad as it was after Panitubo. I think the weather was even crazier because Panitubo blocked out so much sunlight that global temperatures went into a free fall in 1992. It's not happening right now to that severity. They are going down, but not in free fall. It's because the change is a lot more gradual than we see from this than we saw from the eruption of Panitubo. Panitubo, when that erupted, it instantly changed the deck of cards overnight almost. Because suddenly a whole lot of sunlight was being blocked out from reaching the Earth's surface in a very short time from that eruption. A decline in solar activity is a lot more gradual, but it will eventually lead to the same results if it continues. But instead of lasting only a couple of years, it may last decades like that once it sets in if the sun remains quiet. This pattern can go on, causing major disruptions for growing and food supplies, perhaps. So is the sun going into a long-term quiet phase? It could possibly be. We don't know for sure yet. One cycle isn't enough to draw that conclusion totally. There is a lot of talk that it is in certain YouTube channels are talking about we're going into a minimum, a long-term. We don't know that for sure yet. We could be, but it's not a certainty. Only one low cycle is not enough to say that this is definitely going to happen. But we should be prepared for it. For example, if we're living in a place like North Carolina, we really should have an alternate source of heat that doesn't require electricity to run. Actually, if we're living anywhere where it's cold in the winter, pretty much almost anywhere in the U.S., we should have a backup source of heat. Because that's what almost did me in 1993. I did not have a backup source of heat. Power was out for days from that storm. And I could not go anywhere because the roads were not plowed. They didn't have the equipment to plow the roads yet. The roads were not clear for, I think it took 5 days or more. But finally, the snow melted enough. They finally got a tractor out, I remember, to clear the road, what was left of the snow. I'm putting this video out there as a warning. These people who were talking about carbon dioxide, we're all going to burn up. Something a lot more severe could be coming if the sun doesn't get active again, or soon. In the coming decades, we could be looking at weather like that on a regular basis that came when Mount Panitubo blew. And worse yet, if another volcano does blow, we don't have a solar maximum now to bail us out like we did those other times. That's quick. So the effects, if another Panitubo-like eruption happened now, the sun is in a very weak state already, the climate is already on a downward trend, and we're going to fall off the cliff if we get another eruption. It's going to be worse. The effects are going to be worse. because we're not in a solar max that can mitigate that anymore. We're in a more of a below average solar regime right now. Any volcanic eruption we get is going to be worse than those eruptions I talked about. The effects will be worse. They happen now. And all I can say is, thankfully, we have not had a major volcano eruption lately. There is talk that volcanic eruptions are caused by a lower solar activity. That's possible, but again, it may not happen. We may have to get decades of low activity to get the volcanoes going like that. I don't think it's going to happen in just 1 week cycle. So I hope you all enjoyed my discussion about volcanoes and effects on climate. These are my insights I've gained from much research. I hope some of what I said made sense in terms of plugging it into weather patterns that I observed in my lifetime. Ironic to say that I was almost a casualty of Mount Panitubo, even though it's so far away. I was almost a indirect casualty of that volcano. Even though I lived so far away from the actual eruption, the effects of that eruption were so far-reaching that it did impact my life in North Carolina many thousands of miles away. So I hope you found this discussion interesting. Yes, we should be prepared at all times for a potential disruption like that storm. It's wise to keep extra food on hand. An alternative way of cooking doesn't require electricity. My truck has a generator, so I can cook even if it generates its own electricity. It has its own generator. But that's a wise thing, is to invest in an alternate source of heat, an alternate source of cooking, to prepare for a potential downturn in the weather. So I'm going to end this video here. I'm just about knocking on the door in 30 minutes. I'm on I-20 East. My plan is hopefully to get into Shreveport. We have hit a lot of delays earlier due to the holiday traffic. Finally, it's moving there. So I hope to get into Shreveport, Louisiana today. I will continue on 20 East into Louisiana a little later on. Perhaps we'll stop there at Shreveport, maybe go a bit further, I'm not sure. We have 162 more miles to Shreveport, Louisiana here.